One of the most luxurious graves in that cemetery is the grave of a mother who, as they say, returned from death to take revenge for the wrong done to her. Martine was 14 years old and lived on the outskirts of town, in a humble little house with his family, who were also very poor. His father worked on the nearby farms for some money to support the family. Thanks to the charity of the neighbors, Martin was always dressed and shod, and no matter how worn the clothes were, he was always spotlessly clean. His mother always told him, "Son, we can be poor but clean." Martin really liked going to school, not necessarily to learn the lessons, but he was in love with one of the classmates, Claudia, the cutest girl in town. She was also the daughter of the richest man in the region. Claudia had inherited her father's bad character. She was pedantic and arrogant, and as pretty she was also conceited and abusive. For Martin, Claudia was an unattainable dream. She would never give him a chance, not even to approach her, but secretly Martin was hopeful, and maybe one day she would show him some kind of interest. Occasionally Martin brought flowers to the Virgin, hoping that she would help him conquer Claudia's cold heart. One afternoon, Martin's mother fell seriously ill, a rare disease that was not known consumed her in a few weeks. Martin suffered greatly because of his mother's illness. And on the day of the funeral, much more. A feeling of loneliness had come over him. The pain was so strong that he could feel it physically. When they were about to bury his mother, he saw that some of his classmates from school went to the funeral. Among them was Claudia with her father. The presence of the girl was a small ray of light, something that gave her a little hope and comfort. When the funeral ended, Claudia and her father approached Martin, and his father gave their condolences, and Claudia's father offered a job to Martin's father in his hacienda. As he did so, he made sure everyone present could hear and see how generous they were. "I know how hard it is to lose a wife. Claudia's mother also died a few years ago. So if you want a stable job, come on Monday to the hacienda and I will gladly give it to you." Martin's father thanked him and everyone went home. On the way to their house, Martin thought that maybe his mother was helping him, even from the other side. Maybe now Claudia would at least be his friend. Monday arrived and both Martin and his father prepared to start the day. The father would go to the hacienda in search of a new job, and Martin would return to school. Martin's clothes were no longer as clean as before. After his mother's death, he no longer had anyone to wash his clothes. He no longer had anyone to iron them. When Martin's father arrived at the hacienda, he asked for the boss. Claudia's father left the house with an expression of annoyance. "What do you want?" "Sir, I came for the job he promised me." "I didn't promise you anything." The other men looked at that scene with curiously. "The truth is that you are not good for working here." "Sir, I have been working in the fields since I was a child. I know how to do everything, and I am not afraid of work." Claudia's father was thoughtful for a while and said, "Okay, go clean the pig pens." Martin's father lowered his head, and he followed one of the employees who took him to the pig's pens. There he stayed almost all morning until they called for lunch. Martin's father was very hungry, because what little food he had at home he had left to the son to eat the night before and eat something at breakfast. When he went to sit with the other workers, the boss stood and he said, "If you want to eat, take your plate and get out of here. You smell like crap. I'm disgusted by you being here." Humiliated, he got up from the table and only took a piece of bread as he left the place where he was waiting at the table for the workers. He heard laughs. He felt like leaving, but if he did that, how would he make money for that day? Even if went to another ranch, it was already late and he would not be paid in full. So he swallowed his pride and went back to finish cleaning up the pens. For Martin, the day wasn't much better. When he arrived at school, he was stalked by the eyes of his classmates, and the occasional giggle escaped, but Martin ignored it. He was too sad to pay attention to those insignificant things. However, when Martin saw Claudia, he felt a little relief and wanted to reach out to greet her. After all, she even went to her mother's funeral. Surely now they would be at less friends. When Claudia saw Martin approaching, she began to sketch an expression of disgust and contempt on her face. Innocent and madly in love with Claudia, he ignored that bodily K to stay away. "Hello, Claudia." Claudia's eyes lit up like two red-hot pieces of metal. "Get out, beggar, what do you think? That because I went to your mother's funeral, we are friends now?" Those words destroyed Martin's heart. Although Claudia continued to insult him and yell at him, he no longer heard anything. Martin only heard his heartbeat, and suddenly everything became dark as the night. He woke up to the laughter of the classmates and the shaking of one of the teachers. "Son, are you okay?" Teacher asked. "Did you faint? It must be the heat. Did you eat anything in the morning?" Martin felt so bad and so humiliated that he just got up and ran out of school. He felt lonely and despised, so he decided to go see the one person who always understood him. He walked to the cemetery, and there lay on his mother's grave. There he cried, and cried so much that he fell asleep. Shortly after, Martin's father arrived, also humiliated and dejected, because when he finished cleaning the pig pen, the boss refused to pay him. He told him that the bread he had eaten had been more than enough payment. He threw him out of the hacienda like a dog. It seems that the day was not good for either of them. The father sat the boy down and wiped the dirt from his face. "Do not worry. All this will pass soon. Tomorrow I will go and see if I get a job, and you will see that we will get ahead." While saying this, he took out a piece of bread from his pocket and gave it to the son. It was a piece of bread he had saved from lunch. Eat something with a full belly, suffering more bearable. Martin didn't tell him anything to his father of what had happened at school, so they went home and rested. The next morning, when Martin arrived at school, I saw that several of his classmates were whispering. Martin wondered what had happened. So he went and asked one of the friends. The friend told him, "The principal has called Claudia's father because all that happened yesterday." At that moment Claudia's father came out like an explosion from the director's office. The footsteps of his boots echoed down the hallway as the man passed by the boy. He looked at him in an unpleasant way and said, "You are as weak and useless as your father." Claudia's father had the same terrifying eyes of Claudia, who was walking a few steps behind. "You are going to pay for this." Martin tried to say that he hadn't said anything, but Claudia gave him a look that left him speechless. Martin was worried. He didn't want trouble. He spent the whole day worried and trying to explain to Claudia that he had done nothing, but she refused to listen to explanations. When it was time to school, Martin saw that several older boys followed them. Martin hurried his pace trying to get out of town and put distance between him, the boys. That was not good. One of the guys said that he was Claudia's boyfriend, so he knew he was in trouble. Once he left town, he ran with all his might, hoping to reach his house before they reached him. But the other guys were older and ran faster. The boys threw him to the ground and beat him until he lost consciousness. They threw him on the side of the road and left. He was there for a while until he woke up. He was very thirsty. The head felt as if it was going to explode. Everything hurt. With difficulty he got up and walked out. It was right in front of the cemetery. So he went in and visited his mother's grave. There, once again, he lay down and fell asleep. When he woke up, it was already beginning to get dark. He looked around and saw an old lady standing in front of an abandoned tomb. The old lady was dressed all in black and was accompanied by an imposing black dog. He looked over and tried to recognize her. After all, living in a small town, everyone knew each other, but he did not recognize it. Martin saw that it was getting dark and stood up. When he was passing by the lady, he greeted her, and the lady returned the greeting and said, "If you want, those who did this to you can pay dearly." Martin was surprised. How could that lady know what had happened to him? "We old people know everything," she replied as if she had been reading his mind. "I don't know what to say," answered Martin. "I don't know why they did this to me." "Yes, you do. It's because of Claudia. That wretched woman has a soul as black as her father's. I know you like her like most of the guys in this town, but she's bad. She is bad like her father. She was the one who sent them to beat you, son. Her father has also done a lot of wrong. That man almost killed your father today. When you get home you will see, and every day Claudia and her father will humiliate you more, and every day they will make you more contempt, and every day they will abuse you and your father even more. But if you want, I can stop all that. See you here in 3 days." Worried, Martin ran to see if his father was okay. Entering the house, he saw that the father was lying on the ground with a swollen face and a broken leg. The father was in very bad shape. So Martin ran out to get help. And as he ran, he saw the village priest coming in his car. The father stopped and saw the despair of child. "My father is dying, father. Please, come and help me." The priest entered the house and saw in the conditions that the man was. With the help of Martin, the two put the father in the priest's car and took him to the nearest town. The father remained at the hospital for 2 days until he died from the beatings. Poor Martin felt more alone than ever. Fearing what would be of his life, he no longer had anyone to take care of him. Now he was left alone, without a mother, without a father. Martin only had a few relatives who lived in the capital, and it would take a few days for them to reach the town. Martin would have to bury his father alone. As he went to the cemetery with the priest, he was thinking about what would become of his life. After burying his father, the priest invited Martin to stay at his house for a few days. "So you can wait for your relatives to get here, and you would not be alone." Martin accepted and asked the priest to leave him alone for a few moments, and that same afternoon he would go to the parish house. Martin looked at his parents' graves with deep sadness and helplessness. He knew Claudia's father was responsible for his father's death. The love he felt for Claudia had now become the bitterest of hatreds. High blood boiled just thinking about her. Suddenly he heard a familiar voice, "I am sorry, son." Raising his eyes full of tears, he saw there in front of him the lady in black, again standing in front of the grave with her black dog. "I told you, son, that I can relieve that pain in exchange for 2 small favors." "How can you do anything, madam? You are already old, and those people are very rich and very bad. I do not want them to hurt you." "Do not worry, son, they cannot touch me. If you want me to help you, just promise me to do 2 things, 2 small favors. You have nothing to lose. Just do as I say. Take soil from this tomb," pointing to the grave that was in front of her, "and today at 12 o'clock at night. Go to Claudia's house. Knock at the door and throw this soil in front of the house. The rest of the throw it at the muzzle of the black dog that is lying in the portal and leave." Martin got his pockets full of soil from the tomb and left the cemetery. At midnight Martin was in front of the imposing door of the hacienda, threw the soil on the ground, and at that moment the guard dog came at him, the same dog that always walked with Claudia's father. The dog came with the intention of attacking Martin. But before the dog approached, Martin threw a handful of dirt in the dog's eyes, and the dog became meek. And having done this he knocked 3 times at the door. The house he shivered. Those blows contained all the pain of Martin. Following the instructions of the lady, he left the hacienda walking, accompanied by the dog. Claudia's father went out of the house in search of the one who had dared to knock at the door in that way. He took a flashlight and a machete and walked around the house. Suddenly, Claudia's father was frozen. In front of him was a huge black bull pulling dirt from the ground with his right front leg, and before he could lift the machete, the bull charged him with all his strength with a headbutt. It took his breath away. The bull walked over him, broke all the bones of his legs, and when the bull finished attacking him, left him for dead and left. When dawn came, everyone started looking for the boss. They found him in the middle of the field unconscious. The employees picked him up and they took him to the house. One of the employees took the car and laid the boss in the back seat. He was accompanied by Claudia and one of the employees of the house. Go to Dr. Montez's clinic in the People's Square. When Martin woke up that morning at the priest's house, he noticed that the dog was lying under his bed. He left the room and found Maria, the lady who was in charge of helping the father. "Come, son, let's make some breakfast." Martin hadn't tasted a bite when a man burst into the kitchen. "Where's the father?" "Last night something attacked the boss and he is very bad. He will need the last rites." "The father is out of town," Maria replied as she left the kitchen. Everyone went out to the square and Martin saw that Claudia's father was being carried on a makeshift stretcher. As she passed in front of the boy, Claudia's father was full of blood and his legs looked like jelly. At that moment, Claudia and Martin's eyes crossed, and as if he had received an order, that fierce black dog threw himself on Claudia's face and bit her face. Out of nowhere another black dog appeared and got a hold of Claudia's left leg. Claudia's screams and the growls of the dogs were horrific. At that moment, Claudia's father regained consciousness and saw how the dogs were destroying his daughter. Some of those present tried to stop the attack, but those dogs were fierce. From the crowd a man came out and cut one of the dogs with his machete, killing him instantly. The other dog disappeared. Martin was confused, dumbfounded. He didn't know what to do with the whole situation. The same curious people took the injured and entered the clinic of Dr. Montez. With the scarce means he had, the doctor tried to save both of their lives. The doctor sent the girl to another village where there was a hospital. But because of the fractures that the father had, it was impossible to move him. The best solution would be to amputate his legs, concluded the doctor. If they moved him, he could die. The same bones could puncture his arteries and cause him to bleed out along the way. The two were in a very bad state. They probably wouldn't survive. Martin felt guilty and began to cry. Peter, the gravedigger, a great friend of his father, who was next to him, said to Martin, "Do not weep, son, that was the justice of God. Everyone here knows that he killed your father. Those people did a lot of damage in this village. The money he had was actually stolen from his wife's family. God forbid that he does not survive." Martin ran through the cemetery expecting to meet the lady, but there was no one there. Martin returned to town and asked several people for the cemetery lady. He gave the description of the lady, but no one knew who she was, so Martin decided to return to the cemetery and wait there. Martin was tired. The events that had occurred earlier had strained his nerves too much. Tiredness caused him to fall asleep again, and suddenly he woke up startled to find the lady again, there in front of the grave. "What did you do that to Claudia and her dad?" "I did nothing and only granted your desire for justice." When Martin was going to continue recriminating the lady, she interrupted him. "I did my part. Now it's your turn to do yours. Go to Claudia's hacienda, and behind the house there is a dry well. Go down the well and you will find a bag. Take it out and bring it here. After that, dig in this tomb and put the bag next to the bones that rest here." Martin was scared, but he felt he had to do what he had promised the lady. After all, the lady had avenged his father. Martin did as the lady instructed. When he arrived at the hacienda, he did not see a soul. The house was wide open. Things were thrown away, and there was nothing of value left. What they didn't take, they broke. Nothing in the house was saved. Martin tied a line and went down. The bottom was dry well. The soil was hard and he didn't see any bags. He looked all over like crazy, but didn't see anything until he had the idea to dig. He took a sharp stone protruding from the wall and began to dig the earth from the bottom. He digged for a long time. He was exhausted, but he couldn't find anything. He was about to give up. When a piece of the wall of the well began to collapse, Martin was frightened and was going to run away when he saw a piece of material sticking out of the wall. He began to pull it. Until he managed to pull it out the hole, it was a sack full of bones. When Martin saw the content, he ran like crazy to the priest's house. When he arrived, Mary fed him and went to bed in the room she had prepared for him. Martin lay down and finally fell asleep. In the middle of the night he was awakened by an intense cold, a cold that froze his bones. Even though they were in the middle of summer, one of the hottest he had ever experienced. He began to search and look around for something to cover himself from that cold when he saw a black shadow. A shadow blacker than the darkness itself in the corner of the room. He covered his face to avoid seeing it and began to pray. A deep voice said to him, "Keep your promise, keep your promise, keep your promise." Martin wasn't able to sleep for the rest of the night. He just waited until it was the early hours of the morning to finish his part of the deal. As soon as the first lights of the morning were seen, he ran to the hacienda to collect those bones. Once he had gathered the courage to put those bones in the sack, he headed for the cemetery. There he found the gravedigger's tools and began digging in the indicated grave. The earth was hard and dry, and although the other tombs were covered by grass, that tomb was totally bare. It was only the earth, nothing grew on it. Suddenly someone took the shovel from his hands. Peter the gravedigger, his father's good friend, told him, "You cannot play here and definitely not in this tomb. That is the grave of the wife of the patron." "Claudia's mother is buried here?" "Yes, and if everything continues as it is, they too will be here very soon." "What is that sack?" he said, opening the bag. Peter jumped back and said, "Boy, where did you get that from? Look, this town is a mess. Don't get into more trouble. You just lost your father?" "Leave that. I'll take care of those bones. Go." "I can't. If I don't do this, the woman is going to hurt me, like she did to Claudia and her dad." "Who's going to hurt you? What happened?" "You can trust me. You know your father was my friend." Martin began to tell Peter, who was losing his composure while listening to the story. "That lady you saw must be Soledad, the mother-in-law of the boss, but that lady has been dead for many years. That lady was the owner of everything that Claudia's father has now. She was a widow and had only her daughter, Claudia's mother. The boss appeared one day at the hacienda looking for work and Soledad gave him work. He got into the house little by little, until he managed to marry the daughter, Claudia's mother. She was very good, but she was a woman of very weak health. When Claudia's mother became pregnant, she was taken to a hospital in the city. And they say that there she died during childbirth. There were complications and she died. One day no one saw Soledad again. The boss said that she had left with relatives because she was very old and had not overcome the loss of her daughter. Some of those who dared to ask ended up dying, others became very rich. The thing is that no one else asked where was Soledad. But son, if you made a pact with the spirit, you have to pay it. If you breach your promise to a deceased, the spirit can destroy your life. It can even take you to the grave. Soledad asked me for two things. One is this, to bury the bones here. And the other one I still don't know what it is." Peter opened his eyes like saucers. "Never do that again. If you don't know what they want in return, do not enter into an agreement. I'm going to let you do your part of the deal, but not now. The town is very upset because the boss didn't die. Some of his employees stole everything they had in the hacienda, and there are rumors that the city police will come to investigate. Go back to the priest's house and come when it gets dark." Martin arrived at the parish priest's house and asked Maria if she knew anything about Claudia's father. He was alive, but both legs were amputated and he couldn't move. Claudia has very severe damage to her face. She was disfigured, she lost an eye, they say she is in very bad condition and the hacienda was looted. They say they stole everything last night. Even the animals. The city police came, but they don't know anything and nobody wants to talk. Well, don't worry about that and eat something that the father asked me to take good care of you. Martin could not even eat because of the anxiety, and when the sun went down he immediately went to the cemetery. There was Peter, who had begun to dig the grave. I'm getting ahead of your work, son. It won't be good for you to be here after nightfall. Finally, they reached the remains that were in that tomb. Martin deposited the sack and said a prayer, covered the pit and went home to rest. The next day Martin's relatives arrived. They were his mother's cousins. They wanted to take him to the city. Martin was ready to leave all that behind. The cousins were teachers and wanted Martin to study. Once again, Martin accepted, for he had nothing to lose. That same day they will return to the city, but first he had to say goodbye to his parents. He was alone for a moment in front of his parents' grave. When he was leaving, he saw Soledad standing in front of her daughter's grave. Now I give you my second request, build a beautiful grave here for me and my daughter. And for the rest of your life, come and visit me. Where I'm going to get money from? Don't worry, you will be a very rich man, but make sure you use some of that wealth to build me a dignified grave. If you don't, Martin, you will pay for it with your life. The year you don't come to visit me, that will be your last. Martin left town, studied and became an important lawyer. Every year without fail he went to the village to fulfill its obligations. He built 3 tombs, one for his parents, one for Soledad, and another one for him. His wish was to be buried next to his parents the day he died. The year in which he was going to marry he made him his yearly pilgrimage accompanied by his girlfriend, and while they were eating in a small restaurant in the square, a woman approached with an old man in a wheelchair. The legs of the old man were missing. The woman's appearance was terrifying, she was all disfigured. He was dirty and missing an eye and smelled very bad. The old man also smelled very bad, the clothes were ragged. The two came over to ask for bread or leftovers, they just wanted something to eat. Martin recognized the woman immediately. It was Claudia, all her beauty was gone. Her face was now a reflection of his black and twisted interior. The owners of the village now were 2 poor beggars eating leftovers. "Do you remember me?" asked Martin. But the woman seemed alienated. Her hands and head were shaking and the old man didn't even move with his eyes fixed and his mouth open. Then one of the waiters came and threw Claudia into her father out. "Go, do not disturb the gentleman." Martin was surprised, because he had not seen them again since the attack of the dog. He had heard rumors of the painful situation in which the two were. Martin wanted to hear the version of the new generations and asked the waiter, why are they in this situation? Weren't they the richest in the village? Yes, but after the day of the attack the world fell apart for them. The boss lost his legs and had a stroke when he saw that 2 dogs were attacking his child. People took advantage of the fact that the boss was injured and stole everything. When the police came and started investigating, they realized that the boss didn't own anything. The hacienda belonged to his mother-in-law, and he had no documents to prove that he owned it. In addition, even if they had the documents to prove ownership of the property, that ranch is no longer useful, the land is dry and bare, nothing grows there, not even grass. Everything is as if the fire had devoured it. I remember when I was a kid, how everyone was in love with Claudia, the cutest girls in town. Today everyone despises her. Martin fulfilled his promise to visit Soledad's tomb until the last day of his life, passing away at the age of 97. Martin was buried next to his parents.